Brad DeRoche. Welcome to my series on guitar fundamentals. This is lesson 17. In today's lesson, we're going to focus on two different categories of expressive device, on articulations and on tempo. With articulations, we're going to be looking at all the different ways that we can start and stop notes, different attacks like staccato and marcato and things like that. And with tempo fluctuations, we're going to be looking at rubato, accelerando, and so forth, a number of different categories. And what I like to do is to practice these with in the most concise manner, and that is to use something like a scale or a fragment of a scale to learn how to get the physical ability down first before I try to apply it to a piece of music. So all of these fundamentals are things that we can practice with scales or arpeggios or slurs, and so that's usually how I like to work on them. I don't really want to try to get them in a piece of music because it's just too haphazard a manner in doing that. Instead, I like to have the categories right in front of me and I just go through them like a laundry list. So today we're going to be working with the two sheets, pages 1 and 2, that are part of this packet that I've sent to you. And today specifically we're going to be looking at page 2. It looks like this. And we're going to start with the articulations. That's right here. I've got it labeled number 4, articulations. Now, I didn't actually define all the terms here, but I'll go through and talk about each one. So if you want a textbook definition, you may want to look them up. Anyway, the first one is staccato. So what is staccato? It's a shortened note. So when we play these, and let's use a scale. And how about one of the ones we learned in lesson 15, one of the advanced scales? How about a 3-octave scale pattern like the G major scale? I'm going to show you with the fingering that I like to use, the more modern fingering in both the right and the left hand. But let's focus on staccato for a moment. So staccato is shortening a note. There's actually 2 ways to do this. One, when we play the note, we can actually release the left hand finger and the note stops. Now, there's a problem with that. Every time we release the note that has energy or vibration in it still, when we release it, the string is still moving. And so this moving string kind of smacks against the fret wire and you get this little buzz at the end of the note. Just try it a few times and you'll hear it. As you lift up the finger, there's a little zzz sound at the end. It's subtle, but it's still there and it's noise, and if we can delete it and get rid of it, let's do that. So here's how we can. We're going to use the right hand to actually stop the string by placing the next playing finger on the string. So if we're doing an IM alternation, if we started with index, for instance, the next note is going to be played with middle finger. So I just go ahead and I put the middle finger on the string and it stops the note from ringing. And it's much cleaner than doing it with the left hand. So what I'm doing here is I'm just getting the next finger on the string sooner than it needs to be there. Okay, so that's a way to practice staccato. Let's move on. The next one is spiccato. This is actually a bowed string technique, and I'm not sure it's a whole lot different than staccato, but I think about it as a slightly shorter note than staccato, which means I'm going to get my right hand fingers on the string even sooner to shorten the note a little bit more. Okay, so a little bit shorter note even still than staccato. The next one is an accent. Now, accents are notes that are louder than the surrounding notes. And I'm going to actually save that one, working on that, until our next lesson, lesson 18, because we're going to focus on the next section on the page, which has a whole bunch of accent patterns. So for now, let's just think about it as a louder note. So if we were playing that same scale, I could perhaps accent every 4th note or something like that. And so on. Okay, moving on. The next one is tenuto, and that is a full note that lasts its full value. sure the notes are nice and full, that they're not getting cut off from one note to the next by either right hand or left hand by lifting the finger too soon. Next is pizzicato. Now, pizzicato is usually requires sort of two different things that we have to do. One, we're going to pluck the note. Most of the time I use the thumb for pizzicato. And we use the fleshy part of the thumb to get a really kind of dull sound. Then we also add another element. We actually put the fleshy part of the side of the palm here on the bridge. So on the bridge saddle, actually right on the saddle or right in front of it. You have to move the placement around very subtly, just a matter of millimeters here, to change the amount of sustain the note gets. So if you want the note to be really close to a full sounding note, sit it right on top of the bridge, the palm. The note still sustains, it still has a little bit of sustain to it. Or if I want a little less sustain, I can actually bring my palm out just a millimeter or two. This is a really subtle difference here, but if I move it out a little, no sustain. Back, sustain. So you have to practice placement of the palm to get the amount of sustain you want. But anyway, I would most of the time play using the thumb only. You can use index and middle on the top couple of strings here, but it's pretty tricky to do, and I only would do that if I had to play a really fast little passage that was pizzicato. It's pretty tough to do. Most of the time I just use thumb. Anyway, you could practice that. The next one is legato, which is a very smooth connection. And I actually talked about this in a previous lesson by making sure that the timing was really precise between our two hands. So the note in the left hand was landing at exactly the time the right hand was pulling through the string. So. Alright, so legato, we need to work on that. And then the last one I have here is vibrato, and that is a movement on the string where it makes it a wavering sound, kind of like a human voice. And it's actually making the pitch go above the note and below the note. So the oscillation of sound, the frequency above and below the fundamental note where it's supposed to be. And this is done by actually moving the hand side to side like this, but the finger cannot move off of the fret. So here's a way to think about it. Pretend that the finger that is going to do the vibrato is glued to the string. So the fingertip can't move, but you're actually trying to pull your hand up toward the headstock of the guitar or down toward the sound hole. All right. So this movement going side to side in this plane, like along the string, is what will help to give us vibrato, but the finger's glued to the string. So notice the fingertip isn't going anywhere, but my hand, the weight of my hand is rocking back and forth, and that gives a tempo or a pitch fluctuation rather to the note. And so we can add that to a scale. This is a type of vibrato that I typically use. I do not like the side-to-side vibrato, like this string bending style that's used more on electric guitar, because the note is always above where it should be, because once we pull the string up, it's higher in pitch, and we only come back to the actual note itself, and so we're basically always out of tune. We're always above pitch, whereas this string type here, the bowed string type of vibrato, goes above and below the actual pitch. So I think it's a much better type to use, more beautiful to me. Okay, that's our articulation. You need to practice each one of those in a scale or some other thing. Next, let's move on to tempo fluctuations, and that's number 6 on the page here. So if you look down here, I have these different tempo words. Accelerando, here's one, and that means to accelerate. And so if we were practicing that, it would sound something like this. So I went faster as I went up. Next, ritardando means to slow. So I'm going to slow down as I go up, or go back down to the main note. Ritardando. Ritenuto is a more sudden slowing, or immediately slower. All right. Allargando is a broadening of sound. So I usually think of that as getting louder and bigger as we go down. And it tends to be used, I think, a lot of times in descending scale passages. But we're getting louder and bigger as we go along. Allargando. Stretto is faster just near the end. Stringendo is pressing faster and getting tighter. I think of that maybe more in a little passage that repeats a lot. Something along those lines. Rubato is a deliberate speeding up and slowing down, a push and pull on the tempo to make it something more expressive. So it's usually both going faster and slowing down as we go along. Etc. We have a couple more here. Menamaso is less movement, less rapid. And then Piamaso, this is more movement, or getting faster usually. Speeding up, if you will. All right, so those are some of the different categories that I practice, and what I like to do is to just pick one category. Let's say it's articulation, and practice that for my entire session on scales. So it really gives us so much more that we can do with the scale. So once we get to the point where we can play a pattern, just doing it the same way over and over and over again doesn't really help us much. We don't grow. So a bit on that. I think about my own growth or ability, and you can think about it the same way or something similar if you'd like, as a circle. So here's my ability. So right in the center would be something that I'm very comfortable with. I can do really easily. So let's say I'm playing this scale with the metronome at, say, 60 beats per minute or something like that. I'll show you now. So if I took this and I played this scale, for me, 60 beats per minute playing 16th notes is right in the center of my comfort zone. I'm not going to grow much if I do that over and over and over. In order for me to grow, I have to push toward the outer edge of my circle, and so that I'm going faster and faster, or making something a little bit more difficult, more challenging, so that I grow. So one thing could be tempo, going faster. So now it's getting faster, it's harder for me, it's getting toward the outer edge of my circle. So in order to improve our skills, we have to push toward the outer edge of our circle, push our abilities, not beyond it so that we're falling apart and introducing tension and getting sloppy technique and all that, but push toward the outer edge of our comfort zone, so we're always trying to expand that circle and our abilities. All right. So I hope that this was useful for you today. It's just two more categories of articulation or expressive devices that we can add to our practice to make our scales and arpeggios more meaningful. And hopefully you'll return again tomorrow, and we'll look at lesson 18 and have some more expressive devices to practice. Until then, practice well. I'll see you soon. Cheers.